Check, test, check 1, 2, testing 1, 2, 3. Good morning, afternoon, evening. My name is Jeff Rolka. Sorry I'm a few minutes late here. My browser crashed for some reason when I tried to go live. Ronaldo, hello, good morning. This is Office Hours, our weekly Q&A. Not much else to say about that. Hello, Karen. Hey, Karen, sorry it took me so long to get back to your email. I just sent you a reply. So yeah, cool. Sounds awesome. Ronaldo, what's all about the new video? Yeah, okay. So I think that YouTube is, YouTube as part of Google is always trying to do new things, and I think their end goal is to streamline the connectivity. I'm totally speculating here, so quote me if you will, but realize I am admitting that this is purely speculation on my part. Um, I think that YouTube is always trying to facilitate or streamline the process of interaction between people who are making videos and people who are watching them, and making this whole go between, this back and forth, occur as easily as possible. And I think one of the areas where they have kind of fussed with it the most is in the live event arena. I know that even I've been doing live events now for just about 2 years, and the live event system has undergone numerous changes. The system that allows you to schedule and do them in advance has undergone a couple different changes and renovations. The beta version has gone through some different renovations, and now this system that I'm currently using is a totally another kind of a thing. So I think that that's what's probably happening. So there you go. Yeah, that's what I think's going on with this. This system seems to work pretty well. It's the immediacy of it seems good. I like the interface on my end. I know that you can't really see that. But it works really well, and it's organized in a fairly nice way. The only thing about it is that, as far as I'm aware, I cannot plan it in advance, so it would like enter the feed. That's probably the only downside that I can think of. Hello, Kionta. Aaron Tremblay, good morning to you. Singing McSingerpants, good morning. Do the muscles that narrow the aryepiglottic fold also affect the thyroarytenoid? I've noticed that when I use Twang and maintain it far down as I can go, I will lose about 4 whole steps of my bottom range. I would have to look up that particular muscle there. Now I'm kind of just based on the word aryepiglottic. If I'm thinking of this correctly, and I would want to double check my work on this. But if this has anything to do with the epiglottis and how it's folding over the vocal fold, then it very well could, at the very least, cut off airflow. But I find it interesting that you're losing it on the bottom range of your voice. I would expect that to be something that you would experience more on the top edge of your voice. But very interesting question. I will have to do a little bit of research on that, Singer McSingerpants. Good question. Bob Omar, I know. I'm thinking about it. Well, thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. Bible Septian. Hello, Jeff. Been learning more about singing high notes, but could you tell me more? Some exercise to smooth it up. Thanks. Even all singers use that term. So, adopt it if you wish, or disregard it if you wish. It's fine either way. But just know that when I'm talking about the secondo passaggio, I'm talking about what is commonly referred to as the break. Now, the differences in how you approach this can vary widely if you're female or male, because in the female vocal um, traditions will sometimes really expand the area of zona de passaggio, and so the process of smoothing it out becomes much less of an issue. If you happen to be male, then the secondo passaggio can very frequently be this very difficult point in the voice to sing beyond, particularly if you've always approached it from below. So, depending on where you are in your practice, um, beginning above the secondo passaggio, being certain that you're starting in your cricothyroid dominant singing voice or head voice, and this is the siren exercises are really good at identifying the differences between the two. So you can use that to to get to ID cricothyroid dominant, and then start working the exercises. Now, there's lots and lots of exercises on the channel that deal with this. And I approach this from the standpoint of over time narrowing the interval within which the secondo passaggio resides. So, for example, in the first exercises that we might do, you would have a perfect fourth between the top note, which is above the secondo passaggio, and the one below it. The next exercise would have a minor third. The one beyond that, and these are all descending exercises. As your ability to be above and below gets more acute, so you can definitively be above and below, and the narrower interval is still entirely possible, then I start working in some ascending, descending exercises or descending, ascending, moving towards scale-wise singing, which is then where you really get to the work on smoothing that out. But it really depends on where you're at. Max, hey Jeff, I have a question. How does one deal with a hoarse voice? I woke up today with a really rough and hoarse voice. Tried to do my daily warm ups, but my voice was very strained and weak. Well, first of all, you may need a little bit of time off. The best way to deal with a hoarse voice is to not get a hoarse voice in the first place. So, if this is a cold, then you need to ascertain whether or not it's okay to sing. Easy way to figure that out. If you cannot vocalize over the secondo passaggio, time to take a day off, at least. If you don't normally vocalize over the secondo passaggio, that becomes a little bit of a trickier question because there's no way to really tell. But you might find that even as you approach the secondo passaggio, your vowel modifications are not going as they might normally do. And in that case, you need a little bit of rest. So, avoiding getting hoarse in the first place is the absolute best thing that we can do. Now, since it's already happened, if it's morning where you are, you may wait a little while till the afternoon till you've been talking and in your body is more awake and you've just been moving about your day. That may make it so that you can do some very gentle warm-ups. Um, Hydration is critical. So, you know, water up, as they say. Um, Room temperature, not too hot, not too cold. You may consider just having a small amount of diuretics if you're a coffee or tea drinker in the morning. So don't overdo that, because what that may have the effect of dehydrating you a little bit, or the heat of it can also cause a little bit more mucus around the vocal fold. Neither of which is going to be advantageous. And try to see how you go. Most importantly would be if you could identify what it was that made you hoarse yesterday or the day before. Now, if it's what you're singing, then evaluating how you are approaching your voice would be very advantageous towards making sure that you don't get hoarse over and over and over again, which can lead to much more serious long-term problems. Up tempo. How can you tell the difference from your falsetto and your head voice? That's a very interesting question. Um, That's a very interesting question. Fundamentally, the fundamental difference between those two is the abduction of the vocal fold when we make our way into falsetto. Now, it depends a little bit on how you are referring to using those words. Um, Some schools of thought on this use those words synonymously. I am not one of those schools of thought. Falsetto, you'll hear me say the words falsetto tone production, which is an effort on my part to differentiate falsetto tone production in the range where the head voice would normally be the dominant mode of phonation versus the actual falsetto range of one's voice. So for the male tenor, head voice typically spans F4 to B4, give or take, B flat 4, B4, more like B4, depending on the Fock. So, a lyric tenor is going to be more like G4 to C5. And the physical sensation of that change is is entirely subjective. In my mind, I have, and this could simply be a reflection of the amount of time that I've been singing these sorts of things. In my mind, and it's entirely arguable because it's arguable whether there are enough nerve endings in the area of the vocal fold to even generate this kind of sensation. But in my mind, I feel that I can actually perceive the vocal fold abducting and separating. Like I said, totally subjective. Arguable whether there's any nerve endings there, anyways. All right. Um, head voice and head voice will the physical sensations of head voice changes in my experience. Now, when we talk about physical sensations, you'll hear me say things like "in my experience" or um, "you might find," because when we talk about the physical feelings of these things, it becomes very subjective very quickly. The way that I perceive the physical sensations can and quite likely are entirely different from your own. So you have to take all of those descriptions of physicality, physical feelings, um, with a grain of salt. Which is to say, it's subjective. Your experience may vary, right? Experiences may vary. So the head voice over time starts off by feeling about as light as a falsetto, but very shortly after that, you realize that there's a difference to it. That in fact, falsetto tone production in the range where you would, if having a connected tone, you would have head voice. Falsetto actually feels more muscularly intense because holding the vocal fold abducted or separated in that range takes a bit more physical effort than it does to have a well functioning cricothyroid dominant singing voice. The longer that you work with your head voice, the less it feels like anything is changing across the secondo passaggio. So most days, in the same way that a vocalist who's had some training will sing past the primo passaggio without much issue. Most days, I don't really notice my secondo passaggio that much. I mean, I know where it is and I know how to prepare for it, but I don't feel it the same way as I did when I first began the process. That's speaking as someone who wasn't really throat locked, but was pretty confused and pretty locked up around the area of the secondo passaggio. And in the beginning, it felt very light, very disconnected, and kind of open and hollow and sort of swallowy. And that persisted for some time. Afterwards, um, sometime it was in that period when I readjusted my breathing and I began to practice apagio. And that's when things really start to normalize or start to feel more consistent across the secondo passaggio. And that brings me to kind of where I am today, which is it feels like it feels quite consistent across that range of my voice. All of which is to say, the best advice I can give you for determining the difference in the way that they feel is to try to notice what the physical sensations are and keep track of them in your mind, but also keeping track of where you are on the piano, or if you're not playing the piano, or and I can perceive that I'm in tune, it feels like this, and when I'm struggling, it feels like this, and try to figure out those differences and figure out what the physical sensations are like to you. I hope that that is helpful. I know that's a very long and involved kind of answer to your question, but I think your question is very astute in in those terms and in sort of noticing the differences. Ansley Hendricks, hello. Caleb Barrett. Hi, I've been using your Mesa de Voce for baritones as a warm up for choir. Just want to say thank you. Thank you. You're very welcome. Glad you like it. The Canary Islands. That is so cool. I have not had anyone mention the Canary Islands. That is really, really neat. Fantastic. Dylan Klein Music, good morning to you as well. David Walsh, hello everyone. Jeff, what do you think of singers altering their timbre? I'm thinking of tenors trying to sound more baritonal, darker color while maintaining the high notes. I think that whoa, David Walsh, there you are. I hmm, that's a very interesting question. On balance, I don't have any problems with that. Um, I think that it's when we try to be something that we are really not. Like if you've got a tenor trying to match the kind of the sort of largeness and resonant qualities. I think this is not a technical term, but like the baritones have a certain juiciness in the lower range. Totally a ridiculous term. I admit it's a totally ridiculous term, but that's my perception of the sound. There's a certain juiciness down there, and when you've got tenors that are trying to imitate that, that can be very unproductive. But for vocalists trying to adjust the balance of the timbre of their voice in above the secondo passaggio or in the zona de passaggio or anywhere in that range, that doesn't seem unreasonable to me at all. As long as they realize that in adjusting their timbre, there's going to be a slightly different balance of the musculature, which means that there can be a slight different balance in the amount of airflow, but we have to still maintain good subglottic air pressure in order to avoid any kind of vocal fatigue. And furthermore, that subglottic air pressure really facilitates those timbre changes because that's what keeps us flexible. Mike, hey Jeff, how's it going? It's going pretty well. I've been working with a voice teacher for about 4 months. Cool. I was waiting for something else here. That's great. Keep going. I guess that's what I have to say about that. Keep going, Mike. Caleb, also greetings from the University of Oklahoma. Thank you very much. Jesse Wong, greetings from Vietnam. I use your warm-ups every day. My range is extended 2 semitones. Overall better sound too. Brilliant. Wonderful, Jesse. Wonderful. Keep up the good work. Bishy J Official, what's the best way to maintain strength on the bridges? Work towards balance. Balance is what's going to generate strength because strength we hear that strength in the form of consistency of tone and consistency of volume. So work towards balance. James, vocal cover. Hey Jeff, random question. How can someone obtain a raspy voice safely? It's going to require a little bit of experimentation. That rasp is often a little bit of vocal fry, which is the outer surface area, or the ventricular folds, the so-called false vocal folds, vibrating along with the thyroarytenoid or main voice. And getting that balance correct just requires a little bit of experimentation to find out what's going to work for you. But you have to be really careful about that. If you find yourself getting really, if you find yourself getting sore or something like that, then, um, you know, back away, and always approach this from what would be commonly called like a clean vocal production or a well balanced. I would call it a well balanced mode of phonation, or well balanced vocal production. And then put a little bit of that in there and see how it affects you, and then, go back away from that. Mandy Cummins, hello to you. Singwise vocals, the AES is the laryngeal outlet, and it has a sphincter, purse strings action that helps narrow the epilarynx, which in turn generates higher frequencies within the laryngeal tube. Interesting. We narrow the AES to make twang. There you go. I forgot who asked that question, but thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. Speaking of terms, just saw you did a video on singing vocabulary. Great idea, and thank you. You're very welcome. That was someone mentioned it. I don't recall where that someone mentioned it either in a comment or someplace, and I was like, "Yeah, why not? That's a great idea." Um, that that I can see that becoming its own kind of separate series or separate thread within the channel. Um, just because there could be just so much, you know, um, I mean, we could go on and on about this term and that term, and I don't even feel like it should be limited to voice teaching terms only. I would love to get into musical terms and talking about the differences between, like a recitative and rubato, for example. Um, Belinda Jones. Hi, Jeff. Belinda BB Jones, Detroit, Michigan. Is this the Belinda that I would have grown up with by chance? I'm originally from that area. I have issues with mucus buildup when I don't rehearse daily. I run a business and go to college and cannot. Oh, probably not. You sound like you're probably not from my sort of class in high school and all that. You might be if you're still in college, although you could be in college, Belinda. Um, yeah, okay, so mucus is your voice's way of recuperating. It's entirely natural. Staying well hydrated, water can be very, very helpful with that. Um, if you go from having a really, really heavy singing day to not singing, then you're probably going to experience a bit more mucus than if you could maybe on those days when you're not rehearsing. Pardon me. Maybe just work in like, a little warm up, like 15 minutes. And it doesn't have to be anything huge, just something to get your voice going and move some of that mucus and stuff around. And that will make it so that the transition from your days off to your rehearsal days is not quite so dramatic. I don't know if that's possible or not, but that would be the best solution for that for mucus is hydration and light vocalizations. Isaac William, morning. Many times after I do my first warm up or do light singing for only 10 minutes, my falsetto will become airy and mute, as if my vocal cords swell. Do I just need more practice? Hmm. Well, when we go from passivity to warming up and singing, those tissues do become more active and engorged with blood a bit more. Like it's like warming up when you're gonna run a race or something like that. You do a little bit of jogging around the track, you do a few laps to get everything moving, and then you're ready for the race. Similar with the musculature and tissues in the larynx around the vocal folds. Um, my suspicion, I don't, I have suspicions about what's happening here. Um, what I suspect is that as you're warming up, you're starting to, and you're singing presumably above the secondo passaggio, um, because things are sort of not really they're not really working in the way that you expect them to, you're sort of falling into more of a cricothyroid dominant singing voice. And once you get warmed up and you're starting to feel things that are familiar, you're falling back on this habit of trying to keep the thyroarytenoids more engaged as you ascend over the secondo passaggio, and that's preventing you from actually entering a cricothyroid dominant singing voice. That's that's a lot of speculation based on a little bit of information. Um, but what I would suggest you do is try some of those exercises working from the top down and see what happens. See if you do your warm-ups and see if your voice is responding normally at the beginning of your warm-up. Then continue your warm-up and then try it near the end and see if it's doing what you're describing here. And if it is, then try doing only exercises that descend from above the secondo passaggio down and see what happens. That will be interesting. And if all of a sudden you start to get a more consistent tone, then you're quite likely engaging too much thyroarytenoid dominance in the zona de passaggio and ascending towards the secondo passaggio, and it's holding vocal fold in an abducted position. Yes, and it seems like twang somehow limits the ability of the thyroarytenoid to contract and shorten the folds because I can't sing low with it. That would seem to be the case. And yes, AES narrowing can cause changes in the height and position of the thyroid cartilage. There you go. Classical clinicians can narrow the epilarynx without laryngeal elevation, but it's usually higher in twang. I don't know if that answers your question or not, singing mixed singer pants, but hopefully that does. There's certainly a correlation there. Can a tenor voice train to get a growl in his voice? Yes. We discussed this a little bit earlier. It kind of depends on what you mean by growl. I don't know if it's the same thing as what people think of as like a little bit of distortion or vocal fry. If that's the case, yes, you can. Um, it takes a little bit of I was sorry, I was reading Mike's comment there. Um, it takes some experimentation. You have to be very cautious with that because you don't want to end up in a situation where you're getting where you're hurting your voice or you're straining or any of those sorts of things. And particularly if it starts to feel aggravated or sore, then back away. Always approach that from the standpoint of uh, a well balanced sound or a clean vocal sound, if you will. I think it's worth mentioning too that when we start dabbling in what I would consider to be extended techniques, we're really starting to tap into the unique aspects of our own instruments. And so, if you're expecting your vocal fry or growl to sound exactly like another person's, there's there's not as much likelihood of that being the case as having a well balanced even tone production sounds similar to another person's because in those well balanced modes of phonation, we're really coming to a balanced, optimized way of singing. When you start doing extended techniques like that, then you're going to sound a bit different, and that should be expected. Not to suggest that we all sound the same. Of course, we don't. But I would suggest to you that in the vowels E and A, with two well balanced vocalists, the differences are much less than in those same two vocalists growling or using what is sometimes called distortion in their voice. Sorry, hit send by accident. Anyways, as she has helped me extend my range mightily, I'm still having trouble connecting and staying attached to the melody. Words, phrases flatten out. Any advice? Interesting. Interesting, interesting. There's a couple things. One, there is often there is often a lag in when we initially begin to make extensions of our range and when that can be effectively utilized in our repertoire. So your vocalizations will outpace your ability to use them in a song. That, of course, diminishes over time. So the longer that you carry on and keep on working in your upper register and doing all that, then the less discrepancy there'll be between what you can vocalize and what you can use in your repertoire in a song. Words or phrases flatten out. Now, the question here is, do you mean that literally or figuratively? If you mean figuratively, um, that's one thing. If you mean it literally, like you're singing flat and out of tune, then there's still too much thyroarytenoid dominance in your voice above the secondo passaggio. It's not entirely that well balanced, and that's causing the pitch problems. If it's just the timbre, but the pitch seems right, that still is a little bit of an imbalance. However, um, in some ways, a little bit easier, I think, to remedy because you can just, well, pardon me. You still have to address the you still have to address the release of the soft tissue in the oral cavity and allow that to resonate sympathetically. So there's still a little bit of over controlling that's happening if you're getting phrases that sound dull or not kind of brilliant and exciting above the secondo passaggio. Um, One of the practices that I really, really like to integrate range into, like, ultimate range into usable range, so what you can vocalize and then what you can implement in a song, is to just take all the vowels. Take the vowels of your phrases, or just work the phrases with only a single vowel initially, and then take out all the consonants and assess whether or not you have good alignment of vowels throughout the phrasing of your song. Um, Listening for changes in timbre, listening for changes in volume, if there are any pitch issues, that too we want to listen for. And when you have your vowels of the phrases of your song in alignment, then start to work your consonants back in and see how that helps. This process can take a little bit of practice. Um, so be patient with it. Um, but I find it to be very, very helpful and useful for a lot of different things. Certainly, for what you're reporting here is one of those things that it's very useful for. Additionally, when I've got vocalists that can vocalize across the secondo passaggio effectively, but cannot necessarily utilize it in a song, that practice is useful for that as well too. Basically, you're changing a song into a vocalization. Mrs. Webster, hello. Good to see you. Just got here in time to hear. That's a very interesting question. Indeed. Indeed. Enjoy your tea. Singwise vocals, I read that already. Mrs. Webster at Singwise saying hello, at Mrs. Webster, at Therial Guru. Therial Guru. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay. Jatavion Butler. What makes a great vocalist? I personally consider Barbara Streisand, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, and Beyonce great female contemporary vocalists. Agreed. What I might throw that back at the crowd. What does make a great vocalist? A great vocalist. Um, I think that if you wish to consider technical expertise, that's fine. If you do not wish to consider that, it becomes subjective. Um, I certainly have my own feelings about vocalists that I consider to be particularly inspiring. I was just mentioning it last week. I was talking about Sarah Bareilles. I always sort of, I'm like, am I saying her last name correctly? I'm pretty sure that's Bareilles. Sarah Bareilles. Um, I think she's amazing. I love listening to her sing. Is she definitively a great vocalist? I'm sure that's debatable. And I'm sure that there are people who would disagree with me mightily, and that's fine. Um, and maybe that's one of the things that is worth considering is how much do you like it? And obviously, I'm invoking subjectivity and taste. My tastes in music are probably different from yours. Yours are probably different from mine. They might not be. I don't know. We'd have to, sit down and talk about it, find out. I'm sure that there are intersections because I mean, I know there are intersections because I can agree with your list of great vocalists. I think that's cool. Um, but I don't know. For me, a certain level of technical proficiency and a demonstration of that skill set is important. Uh, just because that this is going to sound really weird, but it kind of lets me relax and enjoy the music. If I hear a vocalist who is in the zona de passaggio or what I think is probably their zona de passaggio, and I can hear that they're kind of struggling to stay in tune, it makes me really uncomfortable. Like they're going to lose that pitch at any time or something really horrible is about to happen, and it's really hard for me to relax and enjoy the music. Um, but a well balanced, open, brilliant tone in the zona de passaggio is a beautiful thing, and I find it utterly enjoyable to listen to. Um, Gosh, there was another vocalist I was just listening to who was singing. Um, I'd have to look it. I can look it up. It's right here. Um, it was what were they singing? I can't remember her name. Yeah, I know that my Redeemer liveth. That's what she was singing. I believe her name was Catherine. Um, and singing at a church, looked to be a church in England. Um, Brilliant, brilliant vocalist, a remarkably even tone, super agile on all the ornamentation that she was including. Um, just ridiculously precise phrasing, and you can see where I'm going with this, right? Like I I highly value precision in the performances that I listen to. I think that that is a mark of expertise and perhaps greatness. But that's like so many of these things entirely debatable. So if it moves you, Jatavion Butler, then I would enjoy it, maybe try to understand why it moves you, and if you so choose, move in that direction. Mandy Cummins at Mrs. Webster. Mrs. Webster sings vocals. Shatavian, how can I learn a coloratura piece? I find it very difficult because there aren't so many notes, so I don't know what to sing. Slow it down. You may consider practicing it. Oh dear. Slow it down. Work it out. You might consider at least beginning working it an octave lower. Work it on the lip trill. Basically, take it slow. Work it on the lip trill. From there, uh, there may not be a whole lot of consonants to remove, but you might remove the consonants and work with just the vowels for a while, so that you can get the phrasing sorted out, get your breathing right, and then start to put it all back together. Aunt Mandy, Leah, I'm an alto and I have a performance tonight. How should I prepare? Well, hopefully you're already prepared. I mean, if you mean like what should you do between now and this evening, I would say rest and relax. Maybe go over the piece a little bit, warm up adequately, eat an appropriate light meal several hours, couple hours, 2 hours, give or take. I mean, those are the sorts of things that you as an individual will be best served by figuring out by practicing it. So I know for myself that if I have a performance I'm going to do that, like 2.5, 3 hours prior to the performance, I'm going to have some type of light meal. Usually it's like a salad of some variety with some protein like aspect involved. I am going to avoid caffeine in the hours preceding the performance. I'm going to primarily have just room temperature water. When I get my now, most of my performances are done in clubs. So I'm going to avoid talking to people as much as I possibly can before I have to go on. Um, and if I'm doing a multi-set gig, then I will avoid talking to people in between. I will, go to the green room or something like that. It's about being prepared and then maintaining your state of preparation. Um, so if you've done a lot of performances, you may already have your thing worked out. If not, then tonight is a good time to start. So just be comfortable, relax, rest, eat something light before you're a couple hours before you're due to go on. Um, Observe it and see how you do, and maybe make notes. If it works really, really well, then do it again. I'm so glad to hear Mrs. Rehearsals here have been grueling but productive, up to my eyeballs in wigs and makeup. At Jesse Wong, at me, to highlight Sequencer. Always forget about Sequencer. Sequencer, a global voice. You want to keep the conversation going, you go on Facebook. I've been out of town for the past week, so if you put in a request last week, I'm going to get to it right after we're done here. Um, yeah, right. So Sequencer, a global voice, go over to Facebook, do a search for Sequencer, ask to be added because it's a closed group. I'll add you, and then you can submit things to listen to. And it's a really active community of people talking and chit-chatting and sharing different things and all really good stuff. Hello, Karina. Jatavian. I've been sick for a couple days and my head voice has been missing. Only get out a whistle. How can I get back my head voice? Well, stop being sick, first of all. I mean, get over that. Sorry, that came out wrong. Don't stop being sick. But, give yourself some time. If you've been sick, especially if you've been coughing a lot, like you can really, you can really do some sort of temporary irritation and damage to the vocal fold. So let yourself get over that, get hydrated, and then start to just slowly work yourself back in. Just light, easy, comfortable range vocalizations, and then start working back into your upper register. Rushing it is only going to make it take longer. Hello, Karina. Yes, the vocab video came out about as of our discussion here on Office Hours. Oh, thank you, Mrs. Webster. Elle White. Hello, Jeff and Karen. How to safely train a high larynx position. That's interesting. As far as I'm aware, there's only one school of thought that has ever advocated for a high laryngeal position. I would be interested into why you are looking to do that. And maybe offer some thoughts on that. David Flaxman, a tight jaw seems to be the enemy of good high notes. Any advice on how to keep the jaw muscles loose as we ascend the scale? Yeah, you can practice some exercises just to begin the process of breaking, like getting used to doing something different. So, if you're singing E and A, just open, close, open, close. That will get you started on changing that up a little bit so that you can do something different when you're approaching your upper register. One more question from James Vocal Cover. Hey, Jeff, one more question. I have probably asked this one previously about my YouTube. I do both clean and unclean vocals, singing and screaming. I use your videos to warm up my singing voice, but can I also use the same ones for my screaming as well? Assuming that the range is appropriate, yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's notes on a piano. And you could do any number of different things with them. And it's like sometimes in the videos I'll say something to the effect of, if this vowel isn't working out for you right now, just do it with a lip trill. Or I'm going to do it with E-A-ah, E-A-ah. But if that's really easy for you, then do A-ah-oh, A-ah-oh. Certainly. And especially if they're covering the same range. At Belinda. DeMonte, David, oh my God, I can't believe I get to see you live. I have so many questions for my voice and how to make it develop better. Well, thank you for joining us. Here we are. We're here every week. I guess I can't do them like in advance anymore. I don't, it's probably me. I'm probably not doing something correct with, I think I use OBS because OBS was the streaming software I was using before, but I have not been able to get it to connect for a while now. So I've been doing this thing, which seems to work really well. I mean, I really do like the interface and everything, but I can't like plan it and then have it be posted so you guys get like notifications and stuff in advance. JR, can you do a video on growling then? Maybe I can do a little bit on that. I'll think about it. I I really, really hesitate on these extended sort of extended technical practices because one, it all begins with a well-balanced vocal production. Like if you're not starting there, then even if you manage to get a growl that you like one time, you may or may not achieve it the second time. And not want I would not want to I guess it's not up to me to decide that, is it? But my whole thing is about sustainability and vocal health and seamlessness across the secondo passaggio. So I want you to be able to sing into your upper register effectively. I want you to be able to do it for as long as you want to sing for. And I want it to be done in a healthy way. That's like those are my kind of meta goals when I think about my videos and what I'm doing here. And when I start getting into videos like that, then the individual differences of the individual watching the video can sort of trump those qualities. And that's another thing about like the whole whistle tone thing that I haven't done is how do I make these videos and make them in a way so that it's really understood that you're getting into an area where there's a lot of individual differences that come into play and results may vary. I was certain I was about to sneeze. Mrs. Webster, growl question makes me wonder what's going on in the larynx when we hear Roy Orbison's Pretty Woman. I haven't listened to that in such a long time. I would have to listen to it. Paul Stanley. Hey Jeff, I really dig your instructional videos. Can you do some riff lessons? Sure. You wouldn't happen to be the Paul Stanley. I'm a natural baritone. That would be crazy if Paul Stanley were here at our live event. I second the riff lesson. Yeah, I mean that kind of stuff I always do, in multiple Fox. I am a natural baritone. My demo. King Ariane, have you seen Eric Arsenault videos on advanced breathing? If so, how do you feel about those videos? I was diagnosed with multiple tension dysphonia and I'm still struggling to find healthy technique. I have not seen Mr. Arsenault's videos. I've seen like one or two, briefly. I don't make a big habit of going and checking out other people's work on YouTube, just from a variety of reasons. So I'm afraid I can't really comment on what his videos for advanced breathing are like. I mean, of course, he's an incredibly well reputed singing instructor on YouTube. I personally don't know what the content is like. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't be more helpful in that regard. Um, so you know what the thing that I mean, there are lots and lots of Singwise vocals is Karen O'Connor. She has her own YouTube channel. It's a long story. She's usually with us for the first half hour. I shouldn't say usually. She's often with us for the first half hour, which is really cool. Um, my point is that there's lots and lots of information. I would suggest that you dig a little deeper and perhaps, you know, maybe do a little bit of outside reading as well. Case in point, this book, sorry, this book is perhaps one of the most flexible of Richard Miller's writings. Now, it doesn't always have all the specifics and all the nitty gritty on everything that's occurring. Pardon me, goodness, with the individual fox. But there's lots and lots of good information. And I mentioned that book because I don't know why his stuff has been allowed to go out of print, but it's largely gone out of print, and it's not even available like on Kindle and stuff. But that one, there seems to be a lot of them, and you can often find one used more or less inexpensively. Now, if you wanted to do a digital version, the Securing Bass Baritone book and the Training Soprano Voices books are both available on Kindle and I think as like ebooks and stuff. So and those are really inexpensive. Like the bass baritone one is like $13, I think, on Amazon. And all of these, if you go to my Amazon shop, it's like amazon.com/shop/Jeff Rolka. If you just search for me, you'll find it. All of those are there, and you can find them really easily that way. You know, they're much less expensive, and there's lots of information about breathing technique and how to do it, and that might be another place to explore. You know, you can also look for Shirley Emmons' website. There's a lot of information there too. Folks, I have to go today. I'm afraid I have to get out of here a little bit early, but I want to thank you as always. I'm sorry if I did not get to your question. Please pop it in the comments once this has been posted to YouTube, and I will answer it as soon as I can. Thank you as always. I really, really appreciate it. Take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing, and I will see you again.